You may not see it, but it's there, inside you, every day. A silent field where thoughts become destinies. Emotions crystallize into behaviors. Identity translates into reality. This field is invisible, but it's where your financial life begins to take shape long before any decision, effort, or strategy. Most people believe that wealth begins with actions, working harder, controlling better, achieving what's missing. But the truth, as Napoleon Hill taught, is that the real gold is buried in a deeper place, in your vibration, in the frequency of your mind, in what you feel when no one is looking, because it's in this inner state that the outside world is organized. The burning desire, about which Hill wrote so vehemently, is not just wanting. It's not momentary excitement. It's not a list of goals or loose affirmations. It's a stabilized field, an emotional frequency sustained, even in the face of doubt. It's when your intention becomes identity, when what you desire outwardly already vibrates within, as if it were already real. But here's the challenge. Your brain doesn't manifest what you want. It repeats what it knows. Joe Dispenza has shown it clearly. The brain operates in a loop. It recycles memories. It recreates old sensations. It activates neural networks that were born from past experiences, not from future hopes. That's why, even with techniques, even with mantras, even with visualizations, 97% of people don't change because they continue to feel the same way they did before they started. You can imagine wealth, but if your body vibrates scarcity, fear, urgency, that's what the energy field picks up. That's what the world responds to. And no matter how hard you try, the manifestation will just be a repetition of the old script. Working hard, getting frustrated, receiving little, feeling like the universe doesn't hear you, when in fact, it is listening. Exactly what your vibration is telling you. That's why we're here, to begin a 21-day journey that's not about miracle techniques, but about real change. Reprogramming isn't about repeating phrases. It's about dissolving invisible patterns. Inhabit a new field of consciousness where abundance is no longer a dream. It's a familiar frequency, a natural presence, a reflection of who you've become. These 21 days are an invitation to undo the hypnosis of scarcity, to interrupt the emotional cycle that binds you to a past that no longer matches who you feel you can be. And more than that, they are a path to aligning your identity with a practical, expansive, and quantum financial reality. Because true wealth is not a number, it's a state. And that state begins now, within you. The invisible frequency that sabotages your money. Sometimes you say you want it, but something inside you doesn't want it that much. Or rather, something inside you is still afraid of what that desire represents. And that something, that silent part, is exactly what defines your frequency. Not superficial thinking, not the repetition of the goal, but the deeper vibration, the one that happens in the body, in the rhythm of your breathing, in the contraction of your shoulders, in the anxiety that tightens your chest for no apparent reason. There is a distance between what you think you want and what your vibration actually emits. This distance is subtle, but it defines everything, because the universe does not respond to your words. It responds to your coherence. You can say 1,000 times that you want prosperity, but if, inside, what you vibrate is fear of not having, this vibration will be stronger, more stable, more convincing. The universe understands energy, not speech. This is magnetic self-deception, the attempt to attract wealth using the fuel of scarcity, as if the fear of not having were enough to create the experience of having. But that is not how it works. Scarcity is a frequency, and when you vibrate at it, even if you're seeking abundance, you strengthen exactly what you want to transform. You send contradictory signals to the field, and this field responds. With silence, with blockages, with repetitions. Nothing is more frustrating than wanting something intensely, and yet seeing life deliver the opposite. But this is not punishment. It is simply vibrational feedback. Your current financial reality is like a clean mirror. It accurately reflects what you vibrate. Not what you dream, not what you write, but what you feel most consistently. And feel deeply, Maybe you have learned to dream small so as not to be disappointed. Maybe someone has taught you, with words or examples, that wanting too much is dangerous, that wanting more is synonymous with selfishness, and so little by little you have internalized an invisible belief. It is better to be content with little than to run the risk of having nothing. But this belief, even silently, vibrates, and everything that vibrates manifests. That is why, before any technique, before any strategy, you need to have an honest encounter with what you vibrate today, because that is where everything starts. And if you continue trying to build wealth based on doubt, fear, and urgency, all you will find is repetition, the same struggle, the same effort, the same frustration, disguised as newness. Change begins when you recognize, maybe I'm not emitting the frequency of what I desire. And this recognition, as uncomfortable as it may seem, is liberating, because it's only when you see yourself clearly that you can choose differently. And by choosing step by step to vibrate something new, you begin to create something new, not with force, but with truth, not with struggle, but with coherence, hidden error, trying to get rich without changing your identity. You can earn more, you can work twice as hard, you can even achieve certain results for a while, but if inside you, your identity still vibrates like someone struggling to survive, the wealth won't last. Because the mind always returns to the place it recognizes as home. And if that inner home is scarce, worried, guilty, anxious, that's where you'll live again, even after briefly crossing the territory of prosperity. What we call the scarcity mind is not just a belief, it's an identity. It's how you respond to the world, how you make decisions, how you position yourself in the face of money, opportunities, and merit. And a wounded identity, marked by survival, doesn't think about expanding. It thinks about protecting itself. It acts with caution, not with creation. It saves energy. It doesn't multiply value. This mentality creates defensive choices, negotiations based on the fear of losing, not on the confidence of growing. Financial relationships guided by urgency, not by clarity. Projects that are born out of desperation and die in exhaustion. And no matter how much you try to evolve externally, something inside you remains stuck in a limited, conditioned, and small way of existing. It's not for lack of intelligence, nor for lack of effort. It's for lack of internal reconfiguration, because no one teaches that true abundance requires a new identity. An identity that is not defined by what it has suffered, but by what it is ready to receive. That is not guided by trauma, but by vision. That does not negotiate with scarcity, but vibrates in alignment with value. This transition is subtle, but powerful. It begins when you realize that there is no point in wanting new results with the same perception of yourself. When you understand that it is not enough to want to have more, you need to be different. Because what you have is just a reflection of what you believe you are. And if, deep down, you still see yourself as someone who needs to fight, justify, prove, or compensate, your vibration will continue to inform the field that you are not ready to sustain the new. Changing your identity is not an event. It is a process that begins in your consciousness, passes through your body, and stabilizes your frequency. It is not about pretending to be rich. It is about gradually feeling worthy, familiar, at peace with abundance. About letting your body get used to the lightness, letting your mind trust the flow, letting your heart stop shrinking every time it imagines a greater future. It is only when your identity changes that your reality changes with it. Not like magic, but as a reflection, because the external world is not what you want. It is what you vibrate. And if you become, on the inside, someone who lives in abundance, it no longer needs to be sought. It begins to recognize you, and it begins to arrive. Repetition, without reconnection, doesn't work. You've probably heard it before. Repeat, repeat, repeat. Affirm, write, visualize. And yet, even after weeks, months, or even years of repetition, nothing changes. Nothing really changes. What you desired doesn't manifest. And frustration begins to seem like an increasingly familiar echo. But perhaps no one has told you what really matters. It's not the number of times you repeat something. It's the state in which you repeat it, the vibration that accompanies each word, the emotional frequency that cradles each thought. The body is older than thought, and it stores memories. It carries tensions, scars, invisible contractions. You can say 100 times that you are prosperous, but if the body vibrates alert, vigilant, shielded, the message is not imprinted in the quantum field. The universe does not listen to what your mouth says. It responds to what your body feels. And this body, this temple that houses your history, is not convinced by loose phrases. It needs truth, coherence, presence. The so-called vibrational signature is like an energetic perfume that you exhale without realizing it. It is born from the union between what you think and what you feel, between the image you project and the sensation you sustain. When there is congruence, the field aligns. But when there is distance between word and emotion, intention and sensation, the universe goes into standby, because it does not operate by logic. It operates by vibration, and where there is no vibrational truth, there is no materialization. That is why so many mantras, so many visualizations, so many dream maps fail, because they are made in a hurry, in anguish, in the desperation to change the external without touching the internal. And so, repetition becomes just another empty gesture, an attempt to control the invisible with the rational mind. But the invisible field only responds when the soul participates, when the heart is present, when the body says yes. Therefore, before repeating, ask yourself, how am I vibrating right now? What sensation accompanies my request? Is it urgency or gratitude? Is it fear or surrender? Because it is this vibration that creates, not the sound, not the word, but the energy that comes with it. And when this energy is sincere, when it comes from a place of real connection, even a single sentence can rewrite destinies, because the universe does not need volume, it needs coherence. And when it finds coherence, it responds. Always. Neuroplasticity, how the brain changes with wealth or against it. The brain is not a rigid structure, it is a field in constant remodeling. With each experience, with each repeated thought, with each intensely felt emotion, networks are formed, connections are strengthened, and internal pathways become more accessible. And these pathways are followed almost automatically, creating habitual responses. This is how the mind builds maps. And it is with these maps that you navigate your reality, including your financial reality. Studies show that your beliefs about money influence much more than your financial choices. They impact your morale, your self-confidence, your ability to take risks, your perception of worthiness. If, at some point in your life, you associated wealth with pain, loss, pressure, or being separated from loved ones, the brain recorded this as a danger, and everything it understands as danger, it avoids. Even if it is exactly what you say you want, the brain is not loyal to your desires. It is loyal to your emotional survival. And if prospering means, for him, breaking away from family belonging, leaving his comfort zone, facing other people's envy, dealing with judgments, then he will build invisible sabotages to keep you safe. He will delay decisions. He will forget commitments. He will create doubts that seem rational, but are just self-defense mechanisms. Wealth begins as a mental map, and this map can be full of blockages, detours, shortcuts that lead nowhere. But the most beautiful thing is knowing that these maps can be redrawn. Neuroplasticity allows this. The brain can learn a new path. It can associate abundance with freedom, with peace, with contribution. It can learn that it is safe to prosper, that it is natural to receive, that it is possible to grow without losing one's essence. But this change does not happen with formulas. It requires presence, conscious repetition, emotions felt with truth, imagination loaded with meaning. It is not about convincing the brain with logic. It is about teaching the body to trust the new reality. And little by little, with consistency and compassion, the old pathways become less active, and new circuits, aligned with your expansion, begin to take hold. When this happens, life responds differently, because your mind no longer interprets wealth as a threat. It begins to recognize it as part of your path. as something possible, legitimate, even inevitable. And that is when the transformation stabilizes, not as a miracle, but as a natural reflection of a mind that has redesigned itself from the inside to sustain a broader reality from the outside. Beware, financial productivity can also be emotional escape. There is a form of agitation that seems like a virtue, a restlessness that the world applauds. It is the constant search for more, the doing without stopping, the daily rush disguised as ambition. But this movement is not always a sign of alignment. Many times, it is just an escape, a subtle hiding place for the pain of not feeling enough, a sophisticated disguise for the fear of stopping and, in the silence, realizing the emptiness. Productivity can be a mask, and when used to hide unresolved wounds, it does not generate abundance. It generates exhaustion, because what moves us is not clarity, it is lack. It is the attempt to fill with achievements, an absence that can only be dissolved by presence. Many are trying to get rich not for the love of expansion, but for the fear of scarcity. And fear is a volatile fuel. It consumes more than it delivers. It accelerates, but does not sustain. This constant doing, this urgency to achieve, often arises from an older pain, the pain of not being recognized, of not being seen, of having learned too early that value only exists when there are results. And so, life becomes an eternal test of worthiness. Each goal achieved is a temporary relief, but soon another comes, because the root of the emptiness remains intact. And until it is embraced, wealth will continue to be a postponed promise. The anxiety of achieving blocks the inner space necessary to receive, because receiving requires openness, it requires trust, it requires vibrational rest, and those who are always in fight mode, always trying to prove something, cannot relax enough to allow abundance to enter. The quantum field responds to the frequency of permission, not tension, and no matter how hard you run, if your vibration is stuck in urgency, reality will continue to reflect scarcity. There is a difference between genuine expansion and emotional compensation. The first is born of clarity, the second of pain. And although both can generate movement, only one of them generates peace. True prosperity does not require continuous effort. It requires internal coherence, a calm mind, a present body, a heart that no longer runs after, because it knows it already is. And when this state is achieved, doing does not disappear. It just changes tone. It stops being an escape and becomes an expression of who is, of who knows, of who already feels that he is enough, even before conquering, even before proving, even before arriving. The emotional pain that shapes your financial beliefs. Not all scarcity is born of a lack of money. Many times, it is born of a lack of emotional security, from an abandonment that the body has not yet forgotten, from a humiliation that the heart learned to avoid, from a childhood where wanting too much was dangerous, where dreaming was naive, where asking for something was risking not receiving it. And all of this, little by little, began to form invisible roots within you, roots that today translate into beliefs. And these beliefs, silently, govern the way you deal with money. What we call a limiting belief is not, in fact, an idea. It is a reflex, a defense mechanism that emerged to protect a part of you that felt pain. Therefore, it is no use just trying to change the belief in the conscious mind. You need to touch the place where it was born. You need to feel what it is hiding. Because as long as the pain remains active in the emotional field, the mind will continue to find justifications to avoid growth, to maintain the safety zone, to repeat the familiar. Your nervous system is programmed to seek familiarity, not happiness. And if your familiar story is one of scarcity, struggle, constant worry, this becomes the accepted norm. The bank account then stops being just a number. It becomes a vibrational mirror. It reflects not only how much you work, but how much your body allows you to receive. It reflects not only what you want, but what your energy believes is safe. Many people carry, without realizing it, hereditary financial traumas, emotional echoes of family histories marked by loss, bankruptcy, dependence. And these echoes become unspoken internal rules. Don't trust money, it will disappear. Don't shine too much, someone can take it all away. Don't want too much, you can get hurt. And so, with unconscious good intentions, you limit your own flow. But there is beauty in awareness, because once you see where that pain came from, it starts to lose its power. Once you feel what you were never allowed to feel, your system starts to reorganize itself. It's not magic, it's biology. It's spirituality translated into neuroscience. It's the reunion between what you were taught to fear and what, deep down, you always knew was possible. Financial healing doesn't start with spreadsheets. It starts with presence, with the courage to look at the pain, with the willingness to embrace what you've tried to forget. Because in the end, it's not money that heals the pain. It's the healed pain that frees the flow of money. And when that happens, you don't just earn more. You earn differently. You feel differently. And that changes everything. Frequency isn't thought. It's emotional coherence. There's a widespread illusion in modern spirituality that positive thinking is enough, that repeating pretty phrases is enough to change reality. But the universe doesn't just respond to what you think. It responds to the coherence between what you think and what you feel. And if there is a misalignment between head and heart, the vibration emitted has no strength. It has no truth. It has no consistent magnetic field to generate transformation. Thought is impulse. Emotion is direction. When the two are in tune, you create a powerful electromagnetic field. When they are in conflict, you create interference. This is the basis of what Joe Dispenza teaches in depth. The heart and the brain need to be in the same rhythm, not just biologically, but energetically, because it is in this space of coherence that the silent miracle of manifestation happens. You can think about prosperity all day long, but if inside you there is sadness, fear, insecurity, resentment, this emotional charge is denser, older, more influential. The body vibrates what it feels much more strongly than the mind vibrates what it imagines. And this is the reason why so many desires do not come true, because the body is saying no, while the mind says yes. It takes more than intention. Integration is necessary, an emotional presence so authentic that the image of the desired future becomes an internal state and not just a mental visualization. It is not about forcing optimism, but about gradually dissolving the internal noises that prevent the vibration of your desire from stabilizing. Because where there is noise, there is blockage. Where there is coherence, there is flow. Manifesting wealth is not just about wishing for more money. It is about truly feeling that it is safe to prosper, that it is natural to grow, that it is possible to receive without fear, without guilt, without loss. And this feeling is not born of logic, it is born of emotional liberation, from the internal space created when you stop fighting what you feel and begin to truly integrate what is. It is at this point that the frequency transforms, because it stops being a thought and becomes a state that clearly communicates to the universe. Now yes, I am ready to live what I previously only dared to imagine. Andrew Carnegie's mental model, multiplying value, not just gaining. For a long time, the focus has been on money as a goal, earning more, saving more, investing better. But few have stopped to ask themselves, where will this money come from? What will be the source? And more deeply, what kind of person do I need to become so that this source is constant, generous, and aligned with who I am? Andrew Carnegie understood this before many. He was not just looking for accumulation, he was looking for multiplication of value. He understood that lasting wealth is born from the obsession to serve, to solve, to transform. Carnegie did not become a millionaire just out of ambition. He built a rare mindset, an identity that was not fixated on the idea of receiving, but on the mission of adding. His mental map was tuned to the question, how can I do more? With more integrity, with more impact. And it was this coherence between intention, action, and purpose that activated a powerful magnetic field around him. a field where money became an inevitable consequence of a consistent flow of contribution. Scarcity teaches us to look at gain. Abundance teaches us to look at value. Those who think about gain are concerned with control. Those who think about multiplying value are in tune with expansion. And it is this mentality that creates a virtuous cycle, because instead of chasing results, you become a constant source of solutions. You don't just become necessary, you become unforgettable, irresistible, relevant. This change of focus is not simple. It requires a paradigm shift, a renunciation of the childish desire for immediate reward, and a surrender to the vibrational maturity of those who know that to serve is to prosper, that to resolve is to attract, that to deliver more than expected is to activate the field of high return. Carnegie didn't just believe this, he lived it. And for this reason, his fortune was more than money. It was a legacy. Today, this mentality continues to be one of the most powerful secrets of true wealth. Because no matter how much you want something, if your focus is only on what you will receive and not on what you are willing to offer, the flow contracts, the energy stagnates. But when you start thinking like someone who multiplies, who adds, who transforms, something changes, inside and outside. And money, which was once a resistance, becomes a response. It becomes a reflection. It becomes natural. 3. Feelings that prevent money from staying. It is not enough to attract. You have to sustain. It is not enough to receive. You have to allow it to stay, to grow, to become part of your frequency, your routine, your identity. Many people manage to manifest a gain, an opportunity, a leap, but soon after, everything seems to slip through their fingers. The money disappears, the bills increase, emergencies appear, and the feeling of loss becomes a repeated cycle, as if something inside were silently saying, "You can't keep this. This something has a name." They are feelings, invisible feelings that operate in the emotional field below the conscious mind, and that, even without intention, sabotage the permanence of abundance. The first of these is the guilt of having, an internal voice that questions, why me? Who do I think I am? What will they say? And so, even after conquering, the vibration begins to repel the gain, because deep down, you still don't feel comfortable having more than others, or more than your old self deemed acceptable. The second feeling is the fear of losing. Fear activates the body in defense mode. It creates vigilance, tension, excessive control, and this state does not allow relaxation or flow. The mind begins to look for signs of threat. Any fluctuation is interpreted as risk, and money, which should be a source of expansion, becomes yet another emotional prison. Energy enters a state of contraction, and in this field, nothing multiplies. The third is the shame of wanting more. This shame is subtle, but devastating. It is the echo of old phrases, the fear of appearing greedy, the belief that wanting more is a sign of a lack of gratitude. But wanting more is not selfishness. It is a call from the soul for expansion. It is the recognition that you can grow without diminishing anyone, that you can prosper without leaving aside your essence, that you can receive without needing to hide. These feelings do not need to be fought hard. They need to be embraced consciously, because only that which is acknowledged can be transformed. When you realize that it is not the money that is going away, but rather your frequency that is no longer able to sustain it, something changes. The game changes. The field is reorganized, and you begin to prepare yourself inside to be someone who not only receives, but sustains and grows in peace, in coherence, in truth. The brain needs evidence, but faith precedes proof. The human mind seeks security. It wants to know before trusting. It wants to see before believing. But vibrational reality doesn't work that way. The energy field responds to faith, not confirmation, to the frequency sustained in the invisible, not to evidence already manifested. And herein lies the tension. While the brain demands evidence, the soul demands surrender. While the nervous system expects guarantees, the quantum field expects vibrational coherence. The limbic system, a deep part of the brain, is responsible for filtering what is safe or threatening. It was programmed to avoid the new, no matter how positive it seems. Because the new is unknown, and the unknown, for the primitive brain, is synonymous with risk. Therefore, every expansion activates a subtle resistance, a discomfort that is often interpreted as a sign that something is wrong, when in fact it is just the brain demanding proof ahead of time. But there is a way, and it starts by creating micro-evidence. Small experiences that signal to the nervous system that it is safe to expand. An unexpected gain, a gesture of generosity that returns, a moment of peace while visualizing the future. These moments, although discrete, are like seeds planted in the mind. They inform the brain that something new can happen, and that this does not represent a threat, but rather growth. Joe Dispenza teaches that it is necessary to teach the body, through emotion, what the future will be like before it manifests. Feel before seeing, vibration before testing, because it is this anticipated emotional state that reprograms the neural response. Faith, in this context, is not blind belief. It is energetic alignment with a reality that has not yet materialized, but that is already felt as real. It is the conscious decision to vibrate as someone who has already received, even when the eyes still see scarcity. This practice is not easy, but it is powerful. It requires constancy. It requires presence. It requires a trust that is born not from what happens, but from what you choose to sustain. And little by little, this choice changes the field. And when the field changes, the evidence begins to appear. Not because the external world decided to change, but because you changed first. And now you are ready to see what your frequency did not allow you to see before. The effect of rejection on the financial mindset. Every time you heard a no, something was recorded inside you, not just the memory of the rejection, but the feeling associated with it. The frustration, the fear, the feeling of inadequacy. Over time, these feelings begin to build an internal image of who you are. And without realizing it, you stop trying. You stop daring. You stop imagining greater possibilities. Because that silent voice inside you repeats, "You are not good enough for this." Rejection does not only affect the heart, it affects the mind. And, above all, it affects the way you relate to worthiness. Each poorly digested no becomes an invisible barrier, a subtle limitation that says, "This is not for me." And so your life begins to organize itself around an unconscious belief. It is safer not to want than to take risks and not achieve. It is more comfortable to conform than to try and fail again. This protection mechanism creates a vibrational ceiling, a silent limit that defines how far you can go, how much you can earn, what you can achieve. And often, you don't even realize that you are stuck behind this ceiling because it disguises itself as prudence, rationality, realism. But deep down, it is just fear. Fear of being rejected again, fear of hearing another no, fear of getting hurt by wanting too much. The problem is not the no itself. It is the meaning you attributed to it. When a child hears that he can't, that he shouldn't, that he is not good enough, he does not question authority. He internalizes the message. And if this happens repeatedly, he transforms this pattern into truth. A truth that begins to guide his choices, his limits, his vibration, even in adult life. But it is possible to break with this. It is possible to reframe these no's as learning milestones, not as definitions of identity. It is possible to look back and realize that no was not about me. It was about the other, about the context, about the moment. It was not a sentence. It was just an experience. And now you can choose another path. You can make room for a new yes. A yes that does not come from outside, but from within. The yes that you give to yourself. The yes that rewrites your vibration. The yes that frees the field for a reality where prospering is not a risk. It is a right. It is a state. It is natural. The internal archetype of the proud poor man. Not all resistance to prosperity is conscious. Often, it presents itself as a virtue, disguised as humility, simplicity, contentment with what one has. But behind this apparent modesty hides a deeply rooted archetype, that of the proud, poor man, the one who rejects growth not because of a lack of capacity, but because of fear of no longer belonging, because of fear of no longer being loved, because of fear of being different from his own. This archetype is born from an invisible loyalty, an emotional fidelity to the group of origin, to the family that fought, to the community that always had little, to the environment that normalized scarcity as a collective identity. And growing in this context seems like betrayal. It seems like abandonment, as if thriving were an act of selfishness, as if having more meant loving less those who never had anything. It is a silent dilemma. The mind says, I want to grow, but the heart says, what if they push me away? The vibration then divides. The energy contradicts itself, and the field becomes confused, because there is a real desire for change, but also a deep fear of being rejected by those you love. And so, without realizing it, you sabotage yourself. You give up before your time. You accept less than you deserve. You choose shorter, less challenging, more emotionally secure paths. This dynamic is powerful because it touches on something essential: belonging. Every human being wants to belong, to be accepted, to be seen. And if you have learned that love comes with scarcity, it is natural for your mind to associate wealth with loneliness, to associate abundance with rejection, to associate success with distance. And in the face of this, it is the body that reacts. It closes, it contracts, it blocks. But it is possible to free yourself without abandoning. It is possible to grow without breaking. It is possible to transform without betraying, because true loyalty is not repeating the patterns of those who came before. It is honoring them by going beyond. It is showing by your own example that it is possible to live differently, that it is possible to love and at the same time prosper, that it is possible to stand out without losing connection. When this archetype begins to dissolve, the energy reorganizes, identity expands, and you begin to realize that you do not have to choose between being accepted and being prosperous. You can be both. You can be whole. You can be true to yourself and still be a bridge of healing for those who remain. Because when you transform your reality, you don't turn away. You illuminate. You inspire. You liberate. And that is prosperity in its highest form. Why most people self-sabotage when they start to prosper. Something strange happens when things start to go right, when money flows more easily, when opportunities arise without much effort, when the body finally relaxes and life seems to say yes. For many, this is the moment when everything falls apart. For no apparent reason, the person loses focus, creates conflicts, postpones decisions, breaks the rhythm, as if something inside them says, "This is too much, I can't sustain this." Self-sabotage is not weakness, it is protection, an old reflex of the unconscious system that, faced with an expansion outside of the known, tries to bring everything back to a more familiar place. Because the new, even when desired, activates insecurities. And these insecurities speak loudly. They say, will they envy me? Will they demand more from me? Am I prepared to maintain this without losing control? Prosperity activates hidden fears. Fears that don't arise while you're struggling, but that appear with force when you start receiving. Because that's when the unconscious mind needs to deal with new scenarios. More visibility, more responsibility, more exposure. And if your identity is still accustomed to survival, it will interpret this growth as a threat. It will look for subtle ways to get back to where it started, not because it wants to fail, but because it feels safer in it. There is also the fear of rejection, the fear that by prospering, you will become too different, too distant, difficult to understand. And this activates an old pain, the pain of not being loved for who you are. That's why many people unconsciously prefer to fail, not because they lack ability, but to maintain the emotional bond with the group that still lives in the same pattern, to continue belonging, to not feel alone. Healing begins with recognizing this movement, with the honesty of realizing, I'm not afraid of failing, I'm afraid of prospering too much. And this fear, once illuminated, loses strength, because you can teach your body that it is safe to grow, that it is possible to sustain the new, that there is no risk in being more, that true love does not disappear with success. It is strengthened by truth. When self-sabotage ceases to be a necessity, prosperity ceases to be a passing peak and becomes a foundation, presence, continuity, because now you do not just desire more, you allow yourself, you recognize yourself, and the universe, sensitive to your new vibration, begins to deliver not only what you ask for, but what you finally believe you can maintain. Reprogramming is re-inhabiting. The body needs to feel abundance. You may know rationally that you deserve a prosperous life. You may understand all the concepts. You may have read all the books. You may have written affirmations and done visualizations for months. But if your body still vibrates in a state of alert, if it still contracts when you think about receiving, if it still holds deep tensions linked to scarcity, then your reality will continue to reflect this invisible discomfort. Because the body is the home of frequency, and there is only lasting manifestation when the body participates in the transformation. Reprogramming is not just thinking differently, it is feeling differently. It is allowing the body to get used to the new vibration. It is re-inhabiting one's own energy field with another quality of presence, with more lightness, with more openness, with more confidence. It is not about forcing a new identity. It is about allowing it to blossom from the inside out, organically, from a new sensory experience of abundance. Many neuroimagination practices fail because they remain stuck in the mental plane. Images without emotion, phrases without body, visualizations without breathing. And so coherence is not created. The brain imagines, but the body does not believe. And without this alignment, the energy field does not change. The vibration remains stuck in the old defense circuits, in the old records of struggle, in the memories of lack that still live in the muscles, in the posture, in the internal rhythm. For a new reality to stabilize, it needs to be felt, not just as an idea, but as an internal experience, as a state that the body recognizes and embraces. And this begins with small gestures, a deeper breath when talking about money, a conscious relaxation when imagining your ideal life, a spontaneous smile when thinking about abundance. These are details, but it is in these details that the vibration changes. Because the body does not lie, it vibrates what it feels, and therefore it needs to be included in the entire process of change. When the body feels abundance, even before it materializes, it sends a clear signal to the universe. Now I am ready. Now I can receive. Now it is safe to hold. And this signal does not need to be explained. It is perceived. It is read in the field. And when this happens, the invisible begins to reorganize itself. Reality begins to take shape. And life, finally, begins to reflect what before was only intention. Because now, it is also sensation. It is also presence. It is also truth embodied. Why the body resists wealth until it feels familiar. The mind may desire the new, but the body only allows what it recognizes. This is why so many attempts at change fail, because the internal system, especially the emotional body, reacts with resistance to that which is still foreign, even if it is desired. For wealth to become a continuous reality, it needs to be familiar. It needs to feel natural, safe, every day. And this process is not automatic. It is a journey of getting used to it, of gently allowing the extraordinary to become the new normal. Neural plasticity is what allows this transformation, but it has a rhythm. It needs repetition, consistency, and emotional security. The brain does not immediately adopt a new belief just because you want it to. It needs to feel, more than once, that this new path is reliable, that this new frequency is stable, that this new internal state does not pose a threat. That is why it is common for the body to feel uncomfortable when taking the first steps toward a more abundant life. Anxiety, doubt, and emotional fatigue. These are signs that the system is still adjusting its reading of reality. It is still reprogramming its internal reference. And until this new reference is established, the body will try to pull you back to what is known, even if this known is scarce, limited, or painful. Creating safe paths within yourself is one of the most powerful acts on the manifestation journey. It is not about controlling the results, but about creating an internal environment where they can flourish, where success does not trigger alarms, where gain does not generate guilt, where growth does not produce fear. This is done with practices that involve the body, feeling, and time, with simple but consistent rituals, with conscious breathing, with visualizations that not only show but touch, with affirmations that not only tell but comfort. When wealth becomes familiar, it stops being a goal and becomes an identity. It stops being something that is chased and becomes something that is emanated, that is carried in gestures, in presence, in posture, in the gaze. And the universe, upon perceiving this new vibration, responds fluidly. Because now, finally, abundance is no longer an occasional visitor. It is part of the house, part of the body, part of the being. Inner language is the code that activates or sabotages the flow. The words you say silently shape the structure of your reality. They are not just loose thoughts. They are commands. They are codes that the body hears, that the field vibrates, that the universe interprets as it instructions. Inner language is more than mental dialogue. It is the invisible programming that defines how you feel, how you behave, what you allow, and what you reject. That is why prosperity does not start with money. It starts with language, with what you repeat without realizing it, every day, about who you are and what you deserve. There are people who live in a cycle of financial self-abuse, and this abuse is not in external decisions. It is in internal phrases, in the harsh judgment every time they make a mistake, in the silent guilt for wanting more, in the constant comparison that empties any achievement, in the cruel demand that everything has to be perfect, fast, immediate. These phrases create an internal field of punishment. And where there is punishment, there is no permission. Money may even arrive, but it finds no space to stay, because the vibration is of inadequacy, of demand, of fear. Rewriting this code is a profound act of self-love. It is recognizing that you no longer need to mistreat yourself to grow, that you no longer need to use pain as a driving force, that you no longer need to diminish yourself to feel safe. The new language begins slowly, with simple but true phrases, with words that welcome, that strengthen, that heal, that tell your body with sweetness. Now it is safe to thrive. Now you can trust. The mind, upon receiving these new messages, begins to reorganize itself. The circuits of fear lose strength. The pathways of self-confidence are strengthened. The vibration rises. And over time, reality begins to reflect this new narrative. Because the universe is not deaf. It hears everything, especially what you say to yourself when no one else is listening. Transforming your internal language is not a detail. It is a pillar, a daily gesture of vibrational realignment. Because all creation begins with a word. And when this word is born from a place of love, clarity, and worthiness, it becomes a seed of abundance, not as a desire, but as destiny, as a natural consequence of an identity that no longer sabotages itself, that no longer hides, that no longer hurts itself, but that, finally, is truly heard and allows itself to flourish. When money becomes proof of love, the error of compensation, there is an old wound that many carry without realizing it, the wound of not feeling loved for who they are. And in the face of this, an unconscious attempt to prove their worth through doing, giving, and conquering is born. Money then stops being a resource and becomes a symbol, proof, a silent attempt to show the world and oneself that one is worthy, that one is enough, that one is someone. In this dynamic, the more you have, the more you give, the more you invest in others, the more you seek recognition through what you can provide. And as nice as this may seem, there is a price, because when money carries the emotional weight of being compensation, it stops flowing freely. It becomes tense, loaded, fragile, because it is no longer linked to value. It is linked to pain, to the need to be accepted, to be loved, to be seen. Many try to buy affection with gifts, with grand gestures, with promises that go beyond their real limits. And when the return does not come, when the other person does not respond as expected, an even greater void sets in, a feeling of ingratitude, of devaluation, of injustice. But the pain is not in the other person. It is in the expectation. It is in the unconscious attempt to use money as a substitute for the love that was desired but not received. This search, however unconscious it may be, creates a cycle of exhaustion, because no matter how much you give, it never seems enough. It never satisfies, because what is missing is not external recognition. It is internal reconnection. It is healing the relationship with your own worth. It is the understanding that you do not need to give more than you can, nor do you need to constantly prove that you are worthy. You already are, even without achievements, even without applause, even without anything to show. When money stops being proof and becomes a flow again, something changes. It becomes an expression, not compensation. It becomes a reflection of a peaceful energy, not an emotional urgency. And in this cleaner, more honest, lighter vibration, it starts to circulate again. It finds space. It finds truth. Because finally, you stop trying to win the love of others with what you have, and you started offering yourself the love you always sought outside. And that changes everything. Real manifestation is a state, not an event. There is a silent expectation that many carry that manifestation will happen like a rupture, a specific day, a turning point, a magical moment in which everything suddenly changes. But true manifestation is not an isolated event. It is a continuous state, a vibration that stabilizes, a new identity that begins to inhabit everyday life. And therefore, it does not need a spectacle, because it has already become a presence. When you vibrate in coherence with abundance, it does not come as a surprise. It comes as confirmation, as a natural response to a field that was already prepared. It is not an exception. It is a consequence, a reflection of what has become habitual, of what is already experienced internally, because the universe does not reward intense desire. It responds to constant vibration. It aligns itself with what is stable, not with what is occasional. Desperate expectation does not create. It repels, because it carries the vibration of absence. It carries the signal that something is missing, that something is not yet. And this signal is powerful, because even unconsciously it shapes the field. It reinforces the feeling of distance between what one wants and what one has. And this distance, when sustained vibrationally, is perpetuated. The manifestation, then, follows as a future promise, but never as a present reality. The secret is to inhabit now the identity that you imagine you will only live later. Feel prosperous before you see the money. Act as if you are already secure, even when the external scenario does not yet show it. Not as a pretense, but as a frequency, as an internal decision to sustain the new even without immediate proof. Because this decision changes the field. It alters the path. It transforms the rhythm. The manifestation happens when the body, mind, and emotion align in the same vibrational state. When the entire being says yes. When there is no more latent doubt, nor hidden resistance. Only presence, only harmony, only the serenity of who already is. And in this state, time loses its rush. The universe gains clarity, and reality, silently, begins to reorganize itself. Not as an explosion, but as a flow that does not surprise, but confirms, that does not shock, but welcomes. Because finally, you have become what you were looking for. And now, what you were looking for simply arrives. How to create daily rituals for neural and vibrational expansion. True transformation does not happen in emotional peaks. It happens through constancy, in what is repeated with presence, in what is cultivated with intention. Therefore, creating daily rituals is more than a spiritual practice. It is a vibrational architecture, a way of saying to the universe, every day, I am here, I am available, I am consciously choosing what I want to expand. These rituals do not need to be long or complex. They need to be alive, full of truth, capable of involving the body, mind, and emotion in the same gesture, because it is this integration that generates energetic coherence. And in coherence, the field is organized. Reality opens up, abundance approaches. One of the most powerful practices is integrated visualization, as taught by Neville Goddard. It is not just about seeing mental images, but about getting emotionally involved with them, feeling them in the body, inhabiting the scene as if it were real, not as if it were possible. When this happens, the brain registers the experience as if it had already happened. And this vibrational anticipation changes the way you position yourself in the world. Heart coherence is another key. Breathing consciously, connecting to your own heartbeat, allows the mind to slow down. It allows the body to enter a state of receptivity. And in this state, access to the quantum field expands. Internal responses become clearer, and the signal you send to the universe becomes clearer, stronger, more stable. Writing about the past future is a way of reprogramming your internal narrative. By writing as if the future had already happened, you shift the axis of expectation to the axis of achievement. You teach your nervous system that the new reality is already safe, already familiar, and this creates an internal field where the new can flourish more easily. 15 minutes a day. That's all it takes to change your field. It doesn't matter if it's at dawn or before bed. What matters is presence, surrender, the willingness to take a vibrational step every day toward the life you want. Because it's not time that transforms, it's the ritual. And it's not the ritual that has power. It's the energy with which you perform it. That's what expands. That's what realigns. That's what rewrites your destiny. One gesture at a time, one day at a time. A clearer, more yours, more true vibration. And with it, a reality that begins to surrender. Silently but inevitably to your new state of being. Silence, not haste. Why inner rhythm aligns. Outer frequency. We live in an era of speed. Everything is urgent. Everything needs to happen now. There is an invisible anxiety that pushes the mind toward the future and disconnects the body from the present. But the frequency of abundance is not accelerated. It does not shout. It does not rush. It moves silently, deeply, at a pace that can only be accessed when you slow down inside, because it is your inner rhythm that controls the frequency of what you attract. Haste is the daughter of distrust. It is born of the fear that if you do not act quickly, you will lose something, that if you do not control, you will be forgotten, that if you do not hurry, you will be left behind. But this urgency vibrates insecurity. And the universe, which responds to vibration, captures exactly this. The energy of haste blocks the flow, because the quantum field does not respond to fear. It responds to presence. Silence is more than the absence of sound. It is a state of listening. It is a quality of surrender. It is the inner space where truth reveals itself effortlessly, where intuition speaks clearly, where the body finds its original frequency. When you enter this state, even for a few minutes, your vibration changes. Your field is cleared, your choices are refined, and without realizing it, you align yourself with realities that previously seemed distant. The inner rhythm is the compass of manifestation, and often it asks for a pause. It asks for contemplation. It asks you to let go of control and trust, because it is in the interval between action and surrender that the invisible works. That the universe organizes, that life prepares what, right now, you cannot yet see, but that, in the right silence, begins to reveal itself. There is an intelligence in this slow time, a wisdom that does not need noise to make itself heard. And when you learn to respect this time, you discover that everything that seemed to take too long was actually being aligned perfectly. Silence does not delay. It prepares. It tunes. He heals. And when the manifestation comes, it does not come as a response to the cry. It comes as a consequence of balance, of rest, of the peace that you allowed yourself to live, even before everything happened, even without knowing when, because deep down, you already knew whoever is at peace is already ready. And whoever is ready does not need to rush. Just vibrate. Just receive. Just allow. Abundance is not a result. It's a reflection of identity. Abundance is not what you achieve. It's what you embody. It's not a finish line. It's a vibration of origin. Napoleon Hill said, "Wealth begins with a definite purpose and a burning desire. But that desire only takes shape in the world when it finds a body that vibrates in coherence, when it becomes more than intention, when it transforms into identity. You don't attract what you say you want. You attract what you silently believe you are. And these beliefs, often unconscious, define what you allow." William Walker Atkinson said, "You don't attract what you desire, you attract what you vibrate." That's the key. The field doesn't respond to what you eagerly desire. It responds to what you already feel you are, to what you already vibrate as true, even without evidence, even without validation. The 21 days are not about changing the world outside. They're about changing the field inside you. They're about rewriting what seemed immutable, dissolving what was inherited without awareness, releasing what was learned but not chosen, and most importantly, creating a new frequency where abundance is no longer an achievement. It is an inevitable consequence of who you have become. This journey does not end with a result. It deepens with a new perception, because in the end, what you take with you is not what you manifested, but who you have become. An identity that no longer depends on scarcity to feel alive, that no longer needs to strive to deserve, that already vibrates enough, that already carries the truth of deserving, that has already understood that the greatest miracle is not receiving something new. It is discovering that you have always had within yourself everything you needed to create. What is built internally can never be taken away, because those who become someone who manifests do not go back to being someone who begs. Those who recognize themselves as a source no longer get lost in search. Those who align themselves with abundance no longer live in the illusion of waiting. They live in the certainty of presence. And in this presence, everything arrives, everything flows, everything transforms, because now it is you who vibrates differently, and the world simply responds. You have come this far, not just as a listener, but as someone who felt each word as a mirror, who recognized, perhaps in silence, old pains that needed to be seen, beliefs that called for transformation, frequencies that were ready to change. And if you have reached the end of this journey, it is because something inside you has already begun to vibrate differently. You have already begun to allow. You have already begun to choose a new identity. Everything that has been said in these hours is not a formula. It is not a quick method. It is spiritual memory. It is ancestral knowledge that you already carried, but had forgotten, and that now, little by little, is beginning to awaken. Because the true miracle is not attracting what you want. It is becoming someone who already vibrates what you desire, and in doing so, allowing life to naturally reorganize itself around this new vibration. Napoleon Hill spoke about burning desire. William Walker Atkinson revealed that we vibrate what we are. Joe Dispenza showed that the brain can be taught to live the future in the present. All of this connects to a single silent truth. You don't change your life by trying to control it. You change your life by transforming your presence, by transforming your field, by transforming what you allow yourself to feel every day. Now, you carry more than knowledge. You carry a frequency, a vibration that, if fed with kindness, with intention, with constancy, will begin to shape a new time. A time where money is not an end, but an expression. Where abundance is not a goal, but a reflection. Where thriving is not about proving anything, but simply aligning with who you are. And when everything seems slow, or distant, or uncertain, remember, the seed vibrates before it sprouts. The invisible responds before the visible changes. External reality is just an echo of vibrational reality, and yours has already begun to change. Silently, deeply, irreversibly. If this message has touched your field, let it remain. Let it breathe with you in the days to come. Let it vibrate in your silence. Because you're no longer at the beginning. You are in the midst of transformation, and from now on, life will not be about waiting. It will be about allowing, because you are no longer the one who started this path. You are now someone who remembers their truth, and that remembering changes everything, forever.